Couples. What's the most unromantic thing that has happened between the two of you that actually is a stronger indication of love than others might think? During her first pregnancy, my wife retched every night for her entire second trimester. We went to multiple doctors and took a few trips to the ER, never got a reason why. The retching happened every night after midnight, sometimes continuing sporadically for 8 hours. Don't know why, but it never happened during the daytime. One night she thought she was finally doing better, so she went to sleep early and seemed fine. Then suddenly around 1 a.m. she jolted awake, which instantly woke me, and tried to run to the bathroom to retch, forgetting the bucket in her bedside table in her moment of panic. Unfortunately, she slipped and fell on her side and retched all over the carpet. She immediately started sobbing. That poor woman went through such a rough time. So I carefully picked her up, took her to the bathroom, held her hair back while she finished stretching up, and cleaned her face and got her some water to rinse her mouth out. I carried her to bed and then got to work cleaning up the carpet. We were just kids, still in college together. Those 3 months of misery galvanized our relationship. Nothing serious has ever come between us in the years since. Just wanted to add, another great side effect of constantly seeing that out of my wife is that we're both completely comfortable around each other's bodily functions. None of this, I don't want my husband to know I do number 2 nonsense. Pregnancy is tough. It makes your relationship ironclad if you work through it together. Story 2. I have a now 12-year-old daughter who's not biologically his. However, she calls him dad now, and he always refers to her as his daughter. When she was about 10, he'd moved in about 6 months, and we were settling into things as a family. I was working, and they were home hanging out, and she got her first period. I had briefly had a couple of small discussions enough that she knew what was happening, but I was pretty unsure what to do. So he handed her some toilet paper, told her the basic girl trick of putting it in her underwear, and took her to the store. He helped her pick out some pads, detoured to the ice cream, chocolate, chips, and bakery section, and picked up Junior Advil just in case. They settled in on the sofa, and he explained the basics of how to use it. Showed her a quick YouTube video, made up a hot water bottle for her, popped her dirty clothes on to soak, and they snuggled and she talked about it and they Googled answers if he didn't have them. I came home to them, having a nap on the sofa, looking like a slumber party exploded and a happy child. Probably one of the moments I've loved him the most. Jesus Christ, this guy's a keeper. This one for real got me right in the tear ducts. What a champ. Story 3. My aunt got off the bus at 8 years old crying because she was having her period. I felt it's important to note here that I adore my grandpa and that my grandpa lives his entire life pretending that none of his female offspring have anything. He gets extremely embarrassed and uncomfortable at the mention of childbirth, periods, hair, etc. Anything that reminds him that you don't look like Barbie between your legs. Breastfeeding doesn't count, I know, it surprised me too. He was fine with it compared to everyone else in my family and even said, "Leave him alone, I wouldn't want to eat with a blanket on my head either." When I was trying to use a cover and my son kept kicking it off and fussing. My grandma was at work and my poor masculine conservative grandpa consoled her, reassured her that she was okay and he wasn't going to hurt her. Dug out a pad and told her to get some panties and showed her how to put the pad on them before sending her off to shower and redress. Then proceeded with the misery of explaining what puberty is. He still gets embarrassed when it gets brought up. Story 4. My boyfriend texted me one day when he was at the gym that he believed his back had prolapsed. No idea how, but I started Googling what we needed to do about it. I read that if it wasn't serious, you could just push it back in before going to a doctor, instead of heading to the ER. So what do? Put on a pair of gloves, lube my finger up, and kneel in front of him while he's lying on the bed attempting to push it back. Turns out it was just a giant hemorrhoid when he went to the doctors the next day. But I think that was a moment in our relationship where it was established that we both had complete comfort with each other. If your partner can do that, then nothing is really too disgusting or gross to discuss. Story 5. Definitely pranking each other thoroughly. I spent a little more than a year randomly sending him emails from a man named Nolan. He works in customer service, and I made the most ridiculous case for him to solve involving a balloon business. Once in a while, during a slow time at my job, good old Nolan would email him. Last message was about Nolan asking the Hubs to join him in a doomsday bunker. I finally decided to tell him the truth on our anniversary, which is on April 1st. He got me back this Christmas. He anonymously sent me a super low-rent Chevy Chase coloring book. I greatly disliked Chevy Chase, to put it mildly. He enjoyed me plotting revenge against my friends and even egged me on. He finally admitted the truth on New Year's Eve. I plan to retaliate in the near future. Story 6. Been having a tough 2 weeks that causes my anxiety to get on something, which in turn causes me to become depressive and fold into myself. which my husband recognizes as me trying to freeze everything out until I inevitably explode and have a nervous breakdown. The last 2 weeks, he's left me alone, stepped in to help more with the kids, and redirected them so they also leave me alone. Now that I'm more or less better, the things that were stressing me out are resolving, and did not have a nervous breakdown. I went and cuddled with him last night and thanked him for giving me space, because he knew I really needed it. Also, he let me wax his once. Story 7. I recently had a second heart catheterization to check my heart for blockages. Thankfully, there were none. Unfortunately, this time they needed to go through my femoral artery, and I needed to remain on bed rest for about 4 hours after the procedure. I had not eaten all day in preparation for the surgery, so when I got out, I was famished. The nurse brought me hospital dinner, but I could not sit upright to feed myself. My lovely wife of 10 years, who's been a solid rock for me through this ordeal, was excited at the opportunity to feed me. I'm only 32 years old, so being in the predicament and being unable to feed myself was rather humbling. She happily cut my roast beef and potatoes and fed me a bite at a time. You could just tell that she loved being able to serve me in this way. It was not in any way a burden or a chore or a nuisance. She didn't take advantage of the situation to make a humiliating "here comes the airplane" joke. She just carefully fed me and saw to my needs. I know in her heart she had felt rather useless because all my fear and anxiety was pent up inside. She loved having some way to show that she was there for me in a weak and, frankly, scary moment of my life. She's much better than I deserve, and I'm so crazy in love with her. Story 8. My girlfriend once retched on me while we were having intimacy. Apparently, she wasn't feeling well but still wanted to do it. She got queasy and retched on my chest. I was so shocked I didn't know how to react and struggled not to retch myself out of reflex. She was so embarrassed and immediately got off, tossed in a robe, and ran to the bathroom. I cleaned myself off and went after her to check if she was okay. Although she felt physically better after retching, emotionally was so embarrassed, and it took me some time to convince her I still loved her and found her attractive after that. The thing is, I was more worried about her than disgusted about being retched on, and that is love. Story 9. 6 months into a new relationship, he and I took a road trip to go meet my parents. On the way down, we stopped at AJ's restaurant in Mountain Home, Idaho. He loaded up on their amazing fried chicken. It was pretty good food for the price. And we went back to our KOA full and sleepy after a long day of driving. It didn't take long for the farts to set in. If you've never smelled it accidentally, or purposely, breathed in a fart that smells and tastes exactly like the food that's causing them. You won't understand the pain of being stuck in a tiny cabin thick with fried chicken farts. If you have, well, you get it. It was awful. The worst of it was, I'd left to brush my teeth in the bathroom across the lot, and when I came back, the room was already gassed to a point that made my eyes well up. And upon lifting the blankets to climb into bed, I was met with a waft of hot, fried chicken. I practically fell off the mattress onto the floor, gagging and dry heaving, and all he could do was laugh so hard he couldn't control his farts. We celebrated 10 years together in November. Story 10. My then girlfriend and I went to visit my parents about 90 miles from home after eating Christmas dinner at her parents', so we could go see a play with the whole family the next day. We go to my parents' home, okay, and started getting ready for bed. Everyone was already asleep when I started feeling ill. I retched once or twice in the toilet and then started the non-stop diarrhea. I sat there soiling like the world was ending while retching into a trash can. My girlfriend did her best to take care of me when it hit her too. Luckily, I had stopped, and so she took her turn evacuating out of both ends. While I waited for the next wave to come, there was only one toilet we could use. After taking turns back and forth a couple times, we both realized this wasn't going to end anytime soon. And there was going to come a time when we both would have to make a mess at the same time, and honestly, neither of us had the strength to hold it back for more than the time it took to make it to the toilet from the bed. I remember looking at her as we both laid in bed, racked in pain, while it felt like something was trying to claw its way out. I told her if the time came when we both had to go at the same time, I would squat next to her in the bathtub and soiled there so she could have the toilet. She told me she loved me, and we managed to survive the most horrible night I've ever experienced together. We are now married. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 11. It was a horrible time for both of us. We were 14 weeks in and learned that our little one did not make it past 10 weeks. Our ultrasound tech said that we needed to immediately see a doctor. We both looked at each other and knew, but we were hoping for the best. That, unfortunately, did not happen. It was our first pregnancy, and we were both over the moon excited. The sobbing began almost immediately after we saw the doc as he explained what was probably a miscarriage. It was. The first few days after were absolute hell, especially after trying for so long. She eventually needed a DNC, and after an emergency room visit, and I saw things that I cannot unsee. Although looking back now, I'm glad I did because it showed how amazingly strong she can be. That time has since become known as the big sad in our lives. We both understand now that it was not meant to be, and going through it together made us closer than I could have ever imagined. It may sound silly, but hearing other family members and friends go through similar things truly helped the healing process. The story has a happy ending, though. We're currently at 35 weeks and are so excited. Story 12. Early on into my now wife's and our relationship, we were taking our first shower together. Nothing intimate happening, just showering together. It was probably the third or fourth time we had seen one another completely bare. She's washing my back, then moves down to my back. Before I continue, let me set the stage. It's a hot shower, lots of steam, the air is heavy, no exhaust fan in her apartment's bathroom, the door is closed, and obviously the shower curtain is drawn closed as well. Anyway, she's crouching and washing my back. By accident, I let rip the most foul-smelling fart you could imagine. There's complete silence afterwards, and then the smell hit her bad. She quickly stands up and sticks her face outside the shower curtain while coughing and saying, "I can taste it! I can taste it!" I'm stunned into silence. What do you say? She leaves the bathroom and I stand there alone, breathing in Satan's perfume. I'm unsure what to do. Do I finish up and excuse myself and never speak to her again, or do I apologize and act like it wasn't a big deal? I get out of the shower and walk into her bedroom after deciding that I should apologize. She's on the bed with tears in her eyes and red-faced from laughing so hard. I realized right then and there that I'm probably going to marry this woman. She faced a horrible situation and chose to laugh at it instead of choosing to be mad at me. As for how we are now, well, far worse things have left her body since that encounter that I'd like to remind her of, and we laugh about it together. Story 13. My partner and I went on a trip together in 2017 that ended in Washington, D.C. On the last day of our vacation, he got food poisoning, but we didn't realize it until after we'd walked the 2 miles from the train back to the hotel, at which point I was limping on some pretty bad blisters and just wanted to sit down and elevate my feet. He sat down in the bed to rest and fell asleep before even getting his shoes off. And then I noticed that he had a really high fever. For a little while, I tried to just keep a cold cloth on his face and make him drink water, but his fever got so high that he started to hallucinate. And at one point, he wasn't sure who I was. The ice machine was broken and the manager of the hotel wouldn't help me, but the security guard offered to keep an eye on our room to make sure that my partner didn't wander off if I wanted to go buy some ice and medicine. So I put my shoes back on and limped down the hill back towards the nearest pharmacy. I recall thinking to myself at that moment, man, I must really love this guy. If it was just me, I'd just suffer. Thankfully, I found a little tapas place I hadn't previously noticed on the way there, and they were able to give me some ice. When I took my shoes off, my feet were wounded. I spent all night nursing my partner through the worst case of food poisoning I've ever seen and managed to get us to the airport on time the next day. It was pretty par for the course for that trip. It was our worst vacation ever, and we're pretty sure we should just never go back to DC. But at least it's memorable. Story 14. Hopefully my husband doesn't see this, but basically one time I had this horrible pain in the lower right quadrant of my abdomen. I had it for months and nothing helped. I got a load of tests, a CAT scan and an ultrasound, and yet nothing came up. Anyway, we thought it might have been a kidney infection or something, and his dad that worked in the medical field told us that if you did have one, your whiz would smell weird and it would have like white flecks. Some other important info. I have zero sense of smell, so I can't really smell my whiz. And I was super desperate at that point and in tears because of how much pain I was in. Anyway, he offered to smell my whiz for me, but we needed some healthy whiz to compare if it smelled weird or not, so we both whizzed in cups and he smelled both of them with his eyes closed. Sadly for him, they both smelled pretty strong. And he couldn't really tell anything from smelling them, but it was the thought that counts. I still don't know what the pain is, to be honest. I have a colonoscopy scheduled, and hopefully that clears things up for me. And my husband doesn't have to go around smelling my whiz. Story 15. Our second son was born right after our 7th wedding anniversary. We had a 5-year-old at the time, but you forget in 5 years how hard that initial baby stage is. We were so tired all the time, walking around like zombies. My husband was a new elementary principal at the time. I was teaching preschool. One night we walked up to Taco Bell. Walking baby always helped when he was fussy. We're sitting there, eating, trying to relax as much as new baby parents can, with a very precious 5-year-old chatting away too. Both exhausted, when my husband looked at his watch, looked at me, lifted his Pepsi in the air to cheers and said, "Happy anniversary." We both started laughing. Neither of us had even realized it was the date. Our 5-year-old made a big deal out of it, and I'm sure we seemed pathetic to anyone who saw us, but we just smiled at each other and realized this was life. And the fact that we could both laugh about it was a good sign. We celebrated our 27th year together in 2018. Story 16. My girlfriend had just moved to a new city to live with me, so while we had known each other for a long time, everything was new to her, while I had my regular stuff going on. Well, as so much is regular when a girlfriend moves in. My coworkers and I met my girlfriend for lunch and things were going well. Until I trusted a fart. I panicked at this point as I didn't know how she would react to the news of me soiling myself, so I made a lame excuse to go home before going back to work. But she knew something was awry. I then proceeded to arrive home, threw away said drawers, and laundered the soiled jeans. Crisis averted. Or so I thought. After much texting and pressure, I admitted to my girlfriend that I had charted and the jeans were in the wash. I was sure at that point that I would come home to an empty house. Instead, I came home to nicely folded jeans with a post-it that just sharp pants. We've been married for almost 9 years. Story 17. We respected each other enough to take a break that lasted a year and a half. We had been together for 8 years and were still having a really rough patch and didn't want to be together, but didn't want to be apart either. We still thought we should end up together, but during that time, we didn't deserve each other and it was toxic. I moved out, but not super far away. At first, we agreed to only talk once a week unless important circumstances came up. We both went on 1 to 2 extremely failed dates even. After a few months, we started flirting and laughing together again. Within 6 months, we were back sleeping together on occasion. Within a year, we were secretly dating because we didn't want family or friends to have a bit of influence as to what was going on. That time for ourselves allowed for personal growth that was 100% necessary in order for us to grow together. Full disclosure, I was not on board with this in the beginning. I never gave up on us. I was willing to wait an eternity. Within a year of being back together, we got pregnant and married, and this year, we will celebrate all 15 years together, and we never forget to acknowledge our time apart because it was highly instrumental in our journey. Who knew a year and a half of personal growth could be the secret ingredient to a lasting relationship? Story 18. 10 years ago, I was set up with a guy through a friend. A bunch of us stayed over at this friend's house because we were running a 5K the next day, and mostly at a pre-party. This guy and I flirted all night and decided that we needed to cuddle intoxicated. Found an air mattress and snuggled. It was legit a nice guy. No expectations of anything from me. At some point in the middle of the night, I managed to get off the air mattress and make it to the bathroom to retch. I made it in time. Close one. The next morning, I woke up at dawn for the race. Nice guy starts laughing at me. Apparently, when I came back to bed, he asked me if I was all right. I said I retched, but I was good. Oversharing is caring, and he asked if I made it to the toilet. I said no. Say what? He asked where he was, and I screamed, "In the sink!" and fell asleep. Nice guy went to the bathroom, and sure as hell, mess in the sink. He cleaned it all up for me. Shoved hunks of mess down the drain and everything. He cleaned up the sink for someone he knew for 4 hours. We've been married almost 6 years now, and our code for any time we need help from each other is, "In the sink." Hey babe, you need backup putting together the IKEA shelving? No, hon, I'm not in the sink yet. I love him. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.